Hi everybody, it's Chris, and welcome to another video by the Infinity System. Coming to you tonight slightly to the left to allow you to better see the screen. So, tonight we're going to be taking on episode 6, but before we do so, we'd like to go ahead and explain our scoring system to you because there seems to have been a little bit of a misunderstanding regarding that. Basically, here it is. We're not judging the character's actions or judging them as a villain or as a hero, but rather we're judging the content that they are used to present, or represent in this case. We don't watch the episodes beforehand, and we haven't read the comics, so we came into it as blind as any new viewer, from whose viewpoint we were judging, based off of purely what we were shown, and not any outside influence. So, with that said, maybe that will hope to explain some of the inconsistencies that you guys may have picked up on. If not, at least it's a partial explanation. So, moving on with the last episode of the series. As usual, the first 2 minutes of the show are a wrap-up, reminding us of everything that's come before, and we open with yet another eponymous 1950s tune, because Marvel loves to continually remind us of its age and relevance to pop culture. But at least this time it's softened by the fact that it's being sung by Nat King Cole. The opening credits cut away to the corpse of our freshly shot heroes floating in the water of the tomb, seeming to enjoy its slumber, before being unceremoniously hauled out of the water by Harrow's men, as the strains of Mr. Cole inexplicably still float through the tomb. Perhaps Harrow has brought along a boombox loaded with Villain's Best Mix, Volume 23. Said minions then roughly search our corpse for the Ushapti of Amut, and finding it, promptly hand it off to their beloved leader, who in proper villain style chooses not to immediately dash it to pieces and release Amut, but rather to monologue and apologize to their vanquished foe for making them take the terrible actions that led to their death. Funny, abusers do that too. At least Harrow does acknowledge Stephen, Mark, and whoever else may be in there. While Harrow is busy indulging his burdening necromancy, Layla has seized the moment to start acting instead of reacting and has moved out from hiding. Moving behind a pillar, she promptly guts a henchman, the sound of which seems to alert Harrow, and yet he chooses to inexplicably ignore it, again showing the classic villain tendency to get sloppy right when they have the grand MacGuffin Supreme in their hands and are finally ready to do the evil apocalyptic thing we've all been waiting for, or EEATWABF for short. Remember that term, we'll be using it again. Layla finishes the henchman off and watches as Harrow accepts the Ushapti Award for Best Villain. Gives his followers their come to Amut moment before asking, who wants to heal the world? As a horrified Layla watches, Harrow reveals that his staff is in fact a Decepticon by transforming it into an evil-looking ceremonial axe, complete with Bluetooth sound and LED lighting. Showing at least a modicum of restraint, Harrow simply strikes a pose and forgoes the speech, choosing instead to leave the tomb and get on with the EEATWABWF. As Harrow and company leave the tomb, Layla cautiously looks for Mark and Stephen's body. After determining that the lights aren't on and nobody's home, Layla attempts to come to terms with Mark and Stephen's death and chooses to limit her grief and reactions by not screaming her head off at this fact, again showing that, gee, women can be strong under pressure too. It doesn't take her long to discover that Harrow has committed a classic villain blunder by leaving the, to him, no longer important lesser MacGuffin magic handy-dandy Amut tracker sitting right on top of our fallen hero's body. Deciding for some reason that she prefers her corpses moist, Layla allows our hapless corpse to continue floating around as she takes off after Harrow. We cut to a wide-pan shot of Harrow's vehicles off-roading through the desert before they move onto a highway, and wouldn't you know it, right into a traffic stop, complete with armed Egyptian patrol officers. Damn traffic. Having understandably caught the attention of the police by driving across country and onto the road in full view of the blockade, the police then inquire why they were doing so and what they're doing on this road. Harrow and his minions begin to exit their vehicles without being asked, because this is always a good idea when armed nervous men are pointing guns in your face, before Harrow once again attempts to show off his Jedi mind tricks by channeling Gold Hat in the Treasure of the Sierra Madre by telling the officers, "Papers? I don't need to show you my papers. You need to show us your soul." Harrow then slams Amut's staff into the ground, causing a torrent of grape-flavored souls to be judged before their time. Taking off his sunglasses for the sole purpose of looking cool, Harrow then calls the only soldier to survive this taste explosion a good man. As Harrow's minions proceed to move the bodies off the road because, hey, everybody needs to be neat, we see that Layla has somehow managed to insert herself into their midst by the clever disguise of a hoodie and a scarf. Hey, at least it was fitted in desert fashion. Harrow, sensing a grave disturbance in the force, moves about uneasily as a very pissed-off Layla draws a nasty little knife that she soon hopes to plant in his neck. As she moves towards her target, Towerette begins possessing various bodies, pleading for her to stop, that Harrow is too powerful for her to take on alone. With Harrow apparently unable to hear this conversation, despite being 10 feet away, Towerette then explains that Mark and Steven can be brought back to life, but they will need Khonshu released from his Ushabti within the Chamber of the Gods inside the Great Pyramid. Towerette then offers to make Layla her avatar, stating, "Mark says wonderful things about you." Deciding to decline this gift for the nonce, Layla states that she'll fight him on her own and packs up with the rest of Harrow's henchmen. We cut to the outside of the Great Pyramid, where Harrow shows that his staff isn't just a staff, but an axe, a soul weigher, and a door key all in one, by opening a door into the interior of the pyramid. Meanwhile, inside the Chamber of the Gods, said gods are beginning to realize just what dumbasses they truly are, and that perhaps they should have listened to Khonshu and Mark earlier rather than just writing them off for being unstable. Imagine that. As Harrow and his followers storm into the chamber, somehow "I told you so" just doesn't seem to cut it. As Harrow and the avatars of the other gods prepare for immortal combat, Layla wisely takes advantage of the situation and goes looking for Khonshu's Ushabti. With our mortal combat apparently over before it began, Harrow finally gets to the matter at hand and smashes Amut's Ushabti, finally releasing the grape-scented goddess from her long imprisonment. As Harrow and the minions bow in respect, Amut proves that even crocodiles can be uncomfortably sexy in the right outfit. Meanwhile, Layla, having located Khonshu's summer home, grabs it from its niche, and we return to the Chamber of the Gods and Amut sashaying around a nervous Harrow as he questions his worthiness to be her avatar. He knows his scales are not in balance and will accept the consequences of it: death. Amut continues to swish about the room, stating that she once relied upon a servant whose scales were in perfect balance, and that as a result, she was bound in a tomb for 2,000 years. Harrow explains that she has followers whose scales balance perfectly all over the world, and that surely one of them is worthy. Amut then explains that he is the only one who set her free, and that it is he that she needs as her avatar. With our chilling crocodile either running her fingers through his hair or patting her new pet on the head, Harrow consents in a creepy moment and her power moves into him. Meanwhile, Layla, having found Khonshu's Ushabti, immediately smashes it and releases him, doing without hesitation what Harrow should have done a few scenes ago. At least someone around here has some common sense. Reforming, Khonshu states that he doesn't feel Mark Spector in this world, and that he died fighting, no doubt. Layla rejoins with, "Yes, but in your war." Khonshu explains that said war is not over, and with Mark gone, he needs a new avatar, and offers this dubious honor to Layla, just as Mark had suspected that he would. Layla is less than pleased with this prospect, telling him that he made Mark's life a living hell, and just why the fuck would she want to do that job? With Khonshu playing the "you can't win against Harrow and Amut" cologne card, Layla calls his bluff and stubbornly states, "I'll take my chances." Khonshu continues, deciding this time to play the guilt card by stating, "Mark was in crisis over you. His lack of focus got him killed. You need a plan, little bug." Again proving that she's not one to take gaslighting laying down, Layla spits out, "I don't care what you have to offer. Mark didn't trust you. I don't trust you. We'll work together without me enslaving myself." Never one to give up easily, Khonshu finally resorts to facts. We must rebind Amut, and only an avatar can do it. Sticking to her guns, Layla spits out, "I said no," causing a frustrated Khonshu to finally give up and swirl away. One feather purely for Layla, continually showing that not only is she badass physically, but also emotionally. I mean, damn, the girl's already withstood Mark, Harrow, and now Khonshu's bullshit and manipulations. That's hardcore moxie right there. Meanwhile, back in the Chamber of the Gods, Amut finally initiates her EEATWABWF. Let us purify the souls of Cairo, and then the world. Epic, evil, apocalyptic thing we've all been waiting for. EEATWABWF. We told you to remember it, remember? Moving on. As Almut's little army prepares to sally forth on their holy crusade, they're stopped as Khonshu swirls into the room like a tornado in Kansas before materializing in front of the exit and of Amut just in time for her warm words of welcome. Khonshu, time has been cruel to you. Ouch. Savage, girl. Khonshu, seemingly nonplussed, replies, indeed, before telling her that he cannot allow her to proceed. Harrow, finally catching on to the fact that someone among his flock might be a wolf in disguise, tells one of his minions, there's someone else here. Find who released him. With the coming conflict to stop the EEATWABWF established, it's time to cut to Kansas! Sorry, the fields of grass where Mark and Taweret are talking. Taweret explains that the scales are balanced, your heart is full, your journey is over. Mark, cradling his heart in one hand to his chest, perhaps symbolic foreshadowing of what's ahead, looks about in wonder and states, it's so quiet. We'll stop right here because this is an instant feather of truth for Mark. Mark, rather than remark as expected on the beauty of the fields, instead focuses on how quiet it is, and not just the peaceful surroundings, but the lack of voices and noise internally. Something that anyone with DID can attest to is an infrequent and very much longed for experience. That this, above everything else, would be the first thing that Mark would notice is a dead accurate nod to what DID systems often long for more than anything else. To have 5 fucking minutes of peace and quiet without a gaggle of internal voices constantly droning on and on and on. We can't even imagine being alone with our own thoughts. So, good for you, Marvel, intentional or not. Taweret nods then, the peace you've always wanted but never had. You're manifesting it. No danger, no loneliness, or hurt. Mark, without blinking, asks, what about Stephen? Taweret sadly tells him that Stephen is gone, that the Duat has him, advising Mark to enjoy his peace. As a string quartet plays an eye-stinging tune, Mark states flatly, we need to go back for him. Taweret informs him that it doesn't work like that, leave here and you can't return. Anyway, you don't need him anymore, Mark. Mark's having none of it. So I get to go on to eternal peace and he just stays lost in the sand forever? Nah, I'm not good with that. He turns, still clutching the heart, and leaves paradise to find Stephen. As it vanishes for good behind him, Mark realizes that he is now standing on the sands of the Duat, and conveniently for us, within a few dozen yards of Stephen's frozen form. One feather for Mark refusing to leave Stephen behind, and for thinking of himself as not an individual, but being able to make that leap towards the realization that you are in fact a multiple person. This also flies against the face of Marvel's veiled implication that Mark's soul is balanced without Stephen, and ostensibly Jake, although he hasn't been named or revealed as of yet. As Mark moves towards Stephen, we cut to Khonshu and Amut's great debate at the Great Pyramid. Amut makes the opening argument, stating that her path is set, the same as anyone's. I'm here to bring balance. Khonshu rebuffs her. You speak of balance, but look at him. Your avatar is a sinner. Amut then parries, pointing out Khonshu's jealousy of Harrow's loyalty. Khonshu presses his point. Loyalty at what cost? An empty world for your disciples to inherit? Harrow apparently doesn't like being left out of the conversation when the adults are talking and warns Amut of the obvious. Don't listen to him. He only wants to keep you bound. Duh! Keep your mouth shut, Harrow. Pretty sure that Amut's got this. Meanwhile, back in the Duat and directly in front of the gates of Osiris, the only way back to the world of the living in case you had forgotten since the last episode, Mark moves forward towards the frozen form of Stephen. Falling to his knees, he does what most of us do in this kind of situation. Crack a joke and tell Stephen that he's looking pretty rough, man. We're going to stop here to award 1 feather. While this may seem to be simply standard Hollywood script writing, on a deeper level, it actually speaks to the psychology behind this kind of reaction. By falling back on humor, we can use it as a shield between us and the emotions or situation we don't want to face. In Mark's case, Stephen's sacrifice. Trauma victims will often use this reaction and humor as a sort of wry defense. Make a joke about yourself or the situation, and the actual or potential threats may leave you alone. Humor, sometimes literally, can be the last refuge of the damned. Mark goes on, unburdening himself. I don't know if you can hear me. From the moment you arrived, way back then, we were so young. You saved me. I survived because I knew I wasn't alone. You were always there, alive, so full of hope, and I tried to protect that, and I failed. I couldn't protect you." Pausing, he notices that the Duat has begun to claim him as well, freezing him into the sand. He continues, "But you didn't abandon me. You didn't abandon me. And though that field back there was looking pretty good, there's no way in hell I'm going to abandon you." Fighting the petrification process, he struggles on. "You are the only real superpower I ever had." Finally doing the obvious, but at the last possible second for dramatic effect, Mark touches Steven's outstretched hand with his right, which still contains the heart that Mark has been clutching to his chest this entire time because, duh, it's important. As the two are frozen as one with a heart between their hands, the doors of the gates of Osiris open as the heart begins to glow from within, practically and metaphorically binding the two of them together as one through the aegis of Mark's sacrifice and Steven's for his. We're then treated to a far more emotionally loaded Mark, Steven scene than the one we had way back at the Asylum construct, but with each of them resorting to the use of humor we pointed out before as Steven asks, "You came back. What the hell's wrong with you?" Mark states, "I did a whole little speech there." Steven replies, "It wasn't that little." And the two hug warmly before Steven, always the smart one, catches on to the fact that the gates of Anubis now stand open before them. We now cut to the second round of the Great Pyramid Great Debate with Amut coming out swinging, telling Khonshu that for a god he's low on faith, possibly hinting at some history between the two, or was it just the latent dead bird crocodile energies? Khonshu grabs his great big moon staff and states, "You'll never learn." Because, yeah, that's a brilliant thing to say when you're trying to stop a crocodile goddess who's been imprisoned for 2,000 years to back down off her angry revenge plan. Responding predictably to this, Amut decides that Debate Club is over for the time being and takes a more direct approach instead, bird-slapping Khonshu backwards against the entrance, essentially futile, as Khonshu just simply reforms, unscathed. Trading tit for tat, the two proceed to duke it out inside the pyramid as we cut back to Mark and Steven staring at the open doors back to the land of the living, only to discover that the Duat has now formed into a sand tsunami that threatens to engulf them both if they don't make it to the door in time. In predictable trope, Mark now seems to have injured his foot or ankle despite not having an injury before. Regardless, it simply exists to give us the "we can make it, we're almost there, I'm just slowing us down, come on Mark" dialogue as we cut back to what is now Clash of the Titans live at the pyramid as Amut wails on Khonshu's ass hardcore, sending him flying against a wall apparently injured as we cut back to Mark and Steven, still attempting to reach the gates despite the inexplicably gimpy leg. Tawaret, apparently not content to sit off scene any longer, literally comes sailing in on her barge and blocks the sand wave with the side of her boat, buying the pair some time as a jubilant Steven throws his arms in the air and shouts, "Hippo!" As we cut back to a temporary pause in the melee as Amut offers to spare Khonshu if he asks for it. Khonshu decides to choose obliteration over mercy as we cut back to Mark and Steven, almost there, struggling those last few steps into the gate as we're blinded by a searing white light as Mark and Steven come back to life after their siesta in Alexander the Great's tomb and spa resort. Sensing Mark, Khonshu leaves Amut hanging, and as we're treated to a montage of summation of episode 5 that ends with Mark again accepting Khonshu's offer, and 2 9mm bullets falling out of the body and onto the floor dramatically. We're treated to a bit more leisurely transformation sequence because of course it has to be slower to give it the appropriate emotional weight. Confirmed as a revived and recostumed Mark states, "Okay, here we go." Rather than converse in the tomb itself in order to save time, Khonshu decides on a deserted bluff outside for the site of their Moon Knight reunion speech, where he can strike a much more dramatic pose against the setting sun, metaphorically and physically. As Mark approaches, he quips, "I knew you'd miss me," to which Mark has a zinger of his own. "Layla turned you down, didn't she?" Rather than acknowledge this, Khonshu turns to the business at hand, stating that Amut has been freed and he was not strong enough to stop her. Ergo, he needs Mark's help. Quid pro quo, yes? Well, no. Because it's at this point that Mark and Steven's newfound agreement comes into play. Steven, taking the front in his natty white suit with matching nylon stocking cap, the seam lines are supposed to go in back, Steven, asking precisely, how is this new arrangement going to work then? Khonshu informs him that he was not speaking to him, but Steven informs him that they now come as a package deal, and that because of this, Khonshu will have to deal with Steven as well, and finally, that they just saved his life. Thank you very much for that. Promptly plopping himself on a nearby rock and making himself comfortable, Steven continues asking Khonshu for an answer to his question. How's this deal gonna work? Khonshu immediately moves into the "we don't have time for this, why are you negotiating this now" sidestep, leaving out the time already wasted on dramatic poses outside, and Steven mockingly answers, "Well, we did learn from the best, you silly old bird." Snap, Steven. Khonshu responds, "I will release you both, you have my word." Steven, apparently content to not push things further, says, "I like the sound of that. Glad we got that sorted. Now, how the heck are we going to get to Cairo?" Khonshu then takes this opportunity to salve his bruised ego and, for lack of a better word, preen, as he tells Steven, "You forget, little worm, I am still the god of the night sky," before summoning the night and a small dust devil at Steven's feet and gesturing for them to fly. Steven, not so keen on this, tells Mark, "You can handle this one," as a frustrated Khonshu admonishes them both, "Hurry up, you idiots." One feather here for Mark and Steven beginning to work in tandem in what is termed as functional multiplicity, when alters as a group come together to achieve a common goal, like us making these videos, for example. One feather for Steven getting uppity with Khonshu and asserting his rights in this new paradigm. We'll overlook Khonshu's use of worm and idiots because he's a god and a bit of a dick. With Mark switching in for Steven, the mini-tornado shoots him upwards into the sky where his cloak, silhouetted against the moon, forms the moon signal? Crescent moon against a full moon signal. Anyway, it makes for a great screenshot moment as we cut back to the Great Pyramid, where the other gods' avatars are finally realizing just how screwed they are. Gasping for breath, the avatar of the "God, I'm an idiot, and maybe I should have listened before" is helped up by Layla. As Layla hauls him out of sight down a corridor, he asks if she was the one who released Khonshu. As he seems to drift in and out of consciousness, Layla asks how to stop Amut, explaining that the Chamber of the Gods is their most powerful place. It is called the Chamber of the Gods, after all, and that it is from here from which they will need to imprison Amut in a mortal form. Being the smart girl that she is, Layla puts it together and realizes that trapped in a mortal form, Amut would then be vulnerable as well. Hence, mortal. Asking for details on this plan, she's informed that it will take more avatars than they have on hand. Funny that. Before her gasping source of information falls dead to the floor. Bummer! Realizing she needs more help after all, Layla checks her pride at the door and asks Taweret if she's still listening. Our beloved Hippo then possesses the still warm corpse on the floor, speaking to Layla as before, but just a tad over-exuberant and screams, "Layla! I'm so thrilled! We're gonna have so much fun together!" Which, of course, draws the attention of Harrow and his followers. Seeing her in the corridor, Harrow puts his Staff of Everything +1 into action again, laying waste to the inside of the Chamber of the Gods in an attempt to seal her outside. As Layla wisely runs down the corridor away from the explosions, Taweret gleefully accepts Layla as her avatar, her temporary avatar, rather, as Layla pointedly insists. Not really one to argue, Taweret agrees and states that Layla's father will be over the moon when he hears this, before revealing that she had met him on his journey to the Field of Reeds. As Layla absorbs this fact, Taweret asks if they're going to do this or what, and that she has a fabulous costume in mind. We cut back to Mark, jetting his way across the desert to the Great Pyramid, where Harrow has slowly climbed to the top, finally ready to fulfill his part of the EEATWABWF. As Mark moves closer, Harrow lifts his trusty swizzle stick of death and begins to chant, drawing clouds around the top of the pyramid, but not much reaction from the citizens of Cairo, who are apparently used to this sort of thing happening all the time. Abruptly, all of Amut's balanced souls are activated, with neat membership tattoos appearing on their forearms and apparently transferring the ability to judge others as well, which is confirmed as Harrow's trusty lieutenant tells them to do just that. As hundreds of great judged souls stream towards the Great Pyramid, we see Amut standing outside, mouth open and growing taller and more powerful with every one consumed. Left wondering if said soul snapped and popped on her crocodilian tongue, we then cut to Layla making her grand entrance as Taweret's avatar in what is one dead-ass sexy and badass costume, complete with combination sword and built-in wings design. We don't think that the swords are attached to the wings, but it's tough to tell at this point. Still, nice threads. And we're back at the pyramid, where Mark continues to fly towards his inevitable battle with Harrow, who is still using his portable nightlight to spread the good news about Amut to all of Cairo. As Amut looks on, the pair of avatars come together in an improbable but beautifully framed shot that uses the full moon as a backdrop. We rapidly see that the fight is not limited to the avatars, however, as Amut and Khonshu resume their tete-a-tete from inside, both now truly god-sized. As Khonshu pins Amut to the side of the Great Pyramid, Harrow and Mark/Steven plummet through the air before finally hitting the pavement. Hard. As their avatars lie gasping on the city streets, Amut decides that this is the appropriate time for a monologue, telling Khonshu that there is little difference between what they each want for this world, and asking why they should do this dance for the rest of time. Khonshu replies, "You know the answer. I only punish those who have chosen evil." Amut snaps back, "Well, so do I, only I don't give them the satisfaction of committing it." Sweeping Khonshu off his feet with her tail, she makes the inevitable offer. Be at my side. As Khonshu struggles to rise, we cut to Mark getting the shit beat out of him by Harrow, proving yet again that you shouldn't bring croissant-shaped knives to a ceremonial axe fight. Before our would-be axeman is kicked aside as Layla makes her entrance on the scene. Taking advantage of Layla and Mark's hellos, Harrow levies a powerful bolt of energy towards Layla, who quickly proves that those wings act as a shield as well, returning Harrow's energies squarely back to their source, knocking Harrow end over end and out of the fight, momentarily. Our heroes take this short breather to catch up, have a hug, and let Steven express, "Wow, you look amazing! What are you wearing?" Back on his feet, Harrow retrieves his staff and is joined by the remaining minions beginning to advance towards the pair as we cut back to the lovers' spat between Crocodile and Bird Carcass as Amut presses her point home. "Why fight knowing you will fail?" To which Khonshu replies, "Because it is my choice, the very thing you take away." And back on the ground, Steven and Layla enjoy a little light banter before the final round commences. Steven is jazzed to show her their new combined skill sets, and Layla is more than willing to watch and help. The pair purposely speed towards Harrow and company before rapidly and efficiently demonstrating those same newfound skills. Steven really goes to town here, showing an enthusiasm only matched by that of a 3-year-old child spying an ice cream cone on a hot day. As he works through the minions, he puts those foreshadowed nunchucks to good use, even dodging one of Harrow's energy blasts in true Matrix fashion, before seamlessly switching to Mark mid-fight. With the fight on the ground beginning to turn in their favor, Mark shows just what those croissants on his chest are good for. Layla, meanwhile, lets loose her anger and heads right towards Harrow, getting in the first blows before being joined by Mark. As the avatars fight on, the action on the ground mimics that of the larger conflict above, with Harrow making a surprise recovery by blasting Layla and Mark/Steven back with a huge energy blast. Grabbing hold of Layla, Harrow attempts a Vulcan mind melt, sorry to judge her before her time, but Steven is having none of it, whirling into Harrow and pulling him away from Layla. Steven and Mark then take turns keeping Harrow off balance before Layla decides to take possession of Harrow's favoriteest thing in the whole world in order to tip the scales in their favor. As the trio struggle for control of the staff, Harrow spies the inevitable women and or possibly children attempting to flee the battle in a vehicle and decides to follow the script and good villain behavior, attacking them with blasts from the staff and forcing Layla to split off in order to save them. Rescuing a teenage girl from getting crushed by the said van full of older women, perhaps a metaphor? Layla is then asked by her, "Are you an Egyptian superhero?" To which she proudly replies, "I am." Seizing not only her destiny, but also providing a positive role model as well. One feather for that, simply because we're arbitrary bastards in that way. Ripping the door off the van, Layla fulfills her job as Toweret's avatar, protecting mothers and children as she guides her charges to relative safety. Harrow, in the meanwhile, has not been idle and has upped the game by hitting Mark full blast with his staff, giving us a very Harry Potter-like moment with Mark pushing back and holding his own. Harrow, of course, begins to monologue because that's what villains always do right before they kill the hero rather than just getting right to the point the way he did earlier with the gun in the tomb. telling Mark that had Amut been allowed to rule, young Randall's life would have been saved, and your family would have been happy. The wand fight between the two, staff and croissant fight, intensifies, moving back and forth before Layla is pinned to a car during the critical moment by a flying croissant. Harrow goes full Voldemort, finally putting everything he has into one final blast and blowing Mark and Steven off their feet. As Harrow moves in for the final strike, we see again that the action below mimics that of the action above, as Amut turns Khonshu's staff against him, striking him down and pinning him. As Harrow stands over a weakened Mark, we can hear Mark's heart beating faster as Harrow plunges his staff straight into Mark's chest, unleashing a torrent of power as he attempts to judge their soul. As Mark weakens and looks around, we see Layla still in the fight, shielding herself from a hail of bullets at point-blank range. Suddenly, Mark shifts again and suddenly finds himself in the middle of the street, now strewn with corpses, as we've seen before. Harrow's axe in one hand and a still-alive Harrow in the other. Someone, apparently, has stepped in again in order to take care of business. Confirmed as Mark and Steven each state that it wasn't them that did this. Layla, choosing now to easily free herself from the car, asks, "Mark, what the hell was that?" Mark, as puzzled as Layla, states that he blacked out. They look up to see that Amut has apparently beaten Khonshu, having grabbed hold of his collar and begun to drag him back to the Great Pyramid. Layla, wasting no time, grabs the shattered pieces of Harrow's staff and tells Mark to bring Harrow, that she knows how to stop Amut. Mark roughly grabs Harrow, and we suddenly find ourselves back in the Chamber of the Gods, where Mark slams Harrow's broken form onto a conveniently placed slab. Do it again, Mark. Layla explains the plan, and they grab hands, beginning the spell. As they continue to chant, the spell moves from statue to statue, closing in a circle around Harrow, trapping him within its confines. Proving once again that, as above, so below, we return to the outside of the pyramid, and we see that the spell has begun to ensnare Amut, who lashes out at Khonshu. "We could have made this our paradise." Khonshu almost sounds regretful, replying, "It's too late. You will be destroyed." Amut bares her teeth in frustration as back inside the binding ritual continues. Power growing as back outside, we see that Amut has begun to disintegrate, her power being drawn and dispersed before moving down Harrow's throat, sealing her inside, but not before she spits out, "You can never contain me. I'll never stop." Harrow's face goes blank, his mind unable to cope with the experience. Khonshu appears, telling Mark to finish it and leave neither of them alive. Grabbing Harrow, Mark is on the verge of doing just that when Layla stops him, telling him that now he has a choice, that he is now free. Khonshu protests, stating that they must kill Harrow and Amut, that they cannot take the chance that she will find a way out, and that she will kill again. Mark, hearing this, turns to Khonshu and says, "Now you sound just like her. You want them dead? Do it yourself. Now release us." Khonshu, getting a "you better" look from Layla, reluctantly agrees, "As you wish." As Khonshu vanishes, we see the suit up sequence in reverse as his power vanishes in a blast of blinding white light, and we find ourselves back in the asylum construct with a concerned Doc Harrow looking at a bewildered Steven who asks, "So what, this is what reality looks like?" Doc continues on, "The imagination is very real. This chair, the desk, the light were all first created in the imagination." Steven then directly asks him, "But do you believe that Khonshu and Amut are real?" Harrow shakes his head sadly and says, "No, I don't." As the body leans forward, we see that Mark is now fronting as he steadily asks, "And what if we disagree, Doc? What if we believe something different?" Harrow sighs and rises with the rejoinder, "Then our work here continues." Back up front, or perhaps co-con this entire time, which is most likely at this point, Steven asks, "For how long?" As Harrow walks back to his desk, he replies, "How long is a piece of string?" But we can see that all is not as it appears to be, because we now hear the crunching of glass on Harrow walks, and he now leaves bloody footprints against the nice clean white tile of the office. Mark, cluing into this, asks Steven if he sees it too. Steven replies in the affirmative, and as Harrow sits down, he looks down at his feet and asks, "Why am I bleeding?" Looking at him with dawning realization, Steven smiles and says, "Yeah, I don't think you know as much as you think you do." And Mark continues seamlessly, "And while it is tempting to accept your diagnosis, Doc," as Steven concludes, "we'd rather go save the world. Laters, Gators." Letting go of the asylum construct for good, we see the body fall backwards as we cut to Mark waking back up in Steven's apartment as the song from the very first episode begins to play. Sitting up and looking about, Mark asks Steven if he's still there. Steven replies that he is and that he can't believe it worked, as we're treated to a view of the fish tank scattered with Egyptian decorations and now containing 2 goldfish. Rising, Mark strides forward, stating, "I can't believe you live in this frickin' mess," before being caught short by the leash around their ankles, falling flat on his face, thus closing the circle of events to their beginning as we are left to ponder the reality of everything we have just witnessed as the camera fades to black. The credits begin to roll, and the episode and the series come to a brilliant and positive conclusion, giving mostly realistic and positive representation that highlights how DID systems can overcome both the trauma and the issues arising from it and their multiplicity, and how they can work together towards functional multiplicity, each giving what they are best at for the common good of the system. And cut and print, and that's a wrap! At least if that's what you want to be the ending that you remember. But if so, just stop right there and turn off the TV now, because Marvel just has to be Marvel, and throw in the customary after the credits teaser scene bit that they are famous and infamous for, and Moonlight, sadly, is no different. After doing such a sterling job up to this point, Marvel drops the ball and can't resist reaching for the low-hanging fruit. The camera opens up with a shot of a drugged and barely coherent Harrow, now occupying his own version of the asylum construct, except that this one is no construct, but a real hospital. Spilling a cup of coffee, thinking that it contains sand, Harrow catches the attention of an orderly who tells him, "Time for bed." As she moves to wheel him from the room, a pair of dark-gloved hands move in frame and a deep voice says, "I'll take him." Assuring the nurse and telling her to calm down, miss, our dark figure begins whistling as he wheels Harrow from the room and down the hallway. As we move down said hallway, we see Harrow notice that they are not heading in the right direction for bedtime, but instead begin to roll down a hallway containing the obligatory dead orderly/nurse on the floor, complete with pool of blood, just to drive home the obvious violence of our dark figure. Moving outside, we see said dark figure, who any smart viewer knows by this point exactly who it is, either to their joy or disgust, roughly shove Harrow into the back of the limousine before throwing away the wheelchair and getting into the front seat. As the camera pulls back from Harrow's drugged face, he spots Khonshu sitting across from him and giggles. "Khonshu, you can't hurt us." Khonshu, kicked back in a natty suit of his own, perhaps bowing or borrowing from Steven's fashion taste, intones, "Yeah, you want to know something? Mark Spector truly believed that after he and I parted ways, I wanted his wife to be my avatar." As Harrow makes the blah 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 hand motion, Khonshu continues, "Why would I ever need anybody else when he has no idea how troubled he truly is?" Tapping on the side of the window, he turns as the interior window rolls down and gestures. "Meet my friend, Jake Lockley." As Harrow looks on, our long-alluded-to third alter and protector persecutor comes into focus in the rearview mirror before turning to look at Harrow, grimly and chillingly stating, "Today is your turn to lose." He then pulls a gun, smiles, and does what Mark and Steven would not. Shoots and kills Harrow, and by extension, Amut. With this complete and utter reversal of what Mark and Steven just fought so hard to protect, and Khonshu's long game manipulations complete, we watch as the white limo pulls out and moves steadily off into the moon set. No, literally, there's a shot of a full moon in the framing of the shot. And now the final scene and the series, now that the bean counters have had their way because the professional consultant apparently was no longer paying attention and sees the low-hanging fruit that is the violent alter just lying in wait to kill everyone and everyone around them trope. Damn it, Marvel. You dropped the ball at the 5-yard line. All you had to do was leave it alone. Let the credits roll and not dip into the single most over and misused trope regarding DID. A friend of ours put it succinctly, the problem is not that DID is shown in conjunction with horror and violence, in that it's only shown in that way. And damn it, Marvel had done a fairly decent job of things up until this point, leaving us with the final puzzle, how to weigh this in the final balance. Does everything that came before, the accurate showing of the condition, the trauma, the side effects, the character growth, the empowering that can come with cooperation among alters that leads to functional multiplicity and some measure of stability, does that make up for this egregious stink beetle of an ending? Why must Hollywood continue to paint systems, or at least parts of us, as evil psychopaths when in fact protectors are simply misunderstood? Yes, they can be rough around the edges and their behaviors can lead to self-harm and sometimes violent behavior, but they are far more likely to turn those impulses and actions inwards upon the body than to take it out on another person. They are seeking to protect the system in the only way they know how, and this must be acknowledged and understood, treating them as equals within the system and as valid as any other system member. Often just simply being acknowledged and validated in this manner is enough to tamp down the more extreme behaviors and get them to start communicating in a more positive manner. These aren't boogeymen. They are reactions patterned off the abuse that the child endured, and that they were created to help deal with. A protector has one goal: to stop further harm to the system from occurring. Often this can mean pushing others away, because we have a deep-seated fear that others will leave us alone, causing a self-isolating loop that is far more sad than it is violent. Regardless, and perhaps because of all this, we have to give Marvel two hearts. One for leading into the trope, and another for continuing to push the misrepresentation of a highly misunderstood but extremely important part of all DID systems. Bad form, Marvel, and we were ready to sing your praises from the rafters, too. So, let's tally them up for this episode, what few there are. So we see that with 2 hearts to 7 feathers, once again we see that representation, at least for this episode, and in spite of that stink beetle of an ending, still leans in favor of positive representation. In our series recap, next time we'll go over each episode and pull the best and worst bits of each, and then at the end, finally weigh everything all together and see where the scales lie. At that time, we'll address some of the excellent points and questions that you guys have been raising in regards to our reviews and the episode itself, and we will go into detail on the whole question of whether or not Mark and Steven are EPs or ANPs, and the theory of structural dissociation, now that Jake has been officially introduced into the system, and we're no longer just looking at the 2 of them. We would go into it here, but it's complicated, and this review has already ran plenty long enough. At this point, we would like to thank you for watching. Again, tune in for the series recap, and we'd like to thank all of you guys for subscribing, checking out the videos, watching, and commenting. And as always, we'd like to take this opportunity to remind you that you are loved, that you are strong, and that you are not alone. I'm Chris. Thanks for watching.